Climate change is a huge problem facing our world today. In this video, I'm going to be going over some ways that you can fight climate change yourself from the lens of a software engineer. Climate change is a huge problem for the world today. Some experts say it's the single greatest threat to the planet, to its security, to its public health, and even to humanity itself. Right now, we're on track to hit a 1.5 degrees Celsius average global temperature increase since pre-industrial era by the year 2030. What this means for us is increased risk of droughts, extreme heat waves unsuitable for humans, and lack of water available for large swaths of the population. It also means huge loss of habitats for about 1 out of 20 plant and animal species. The bottom line is it's a big problem, and if we want to stop it, we kind of have to start now. So in today's video, I'm going to be listing several actions that you can take today to start fighting climate change. I'll list them in rough impact order. Let's get started. So the first action is to vote. This is an extremely high impact action and extremely low effort to actually do. Voting has a huge impact on a whole swath of things, from creating laws, to choosing leadership, to regulating entire industries. It's first on this list for its really great impact to effort ratio. Some examples of good impacts it can have are creating regulations to limit carbon output and fining those who break them, and creating policies to invest in renewable energies, like wind and solar, and to divest from non-renewables, like oil and coal. Number 2 on our list is to work on projects and for organizations that are directly fighting climate change. Directly solving climate change problems is probably the most impactful thing you can do. Each solution can be implemented at scale and gets us one step closer to averting our global crisis. Even if you don't work directly on a climate change problem, but are still working at an org that is directly working on one, you're still having a direct impact on their ability to succeed as a whole, and so I'd still consider it pretty impactful. Some examples of direct impact are working on solar panels. Maybe you are working on the firmware that runs a solar panel, or maybe you're working on some software that manages an entire array of them. Another example might be to be writing analysis or mapping software to track deforestation or to regulate industries and identify violators. Some examples of indirect impact in this bucket might be to maintain the website for an organization that is directly fighting climate change, or to work in the finance, HR, or legal departments and improve their workflows through software or tooling that you're building. All of these don't directly work on a problem for climate change, but they are improving your organization's ability to succeed and use its resources efficiently. On to number 3 is to influence your project or org to take climate-aware actions. Now, most of us aren't going to work on a project or at a company or organization that is directly fighting climate change. This is for many reasons, but mostly it's that most companies don't work directly on climate change. But just because we aren't directly working on it doesn't mean we can't have a pretty substantial impact on solving the problem. Within our organizations, we can have a direct influence on how we're utilizing our resources, and particularly if this is part of a larger company, utilize those huge amount of resources towards the benefit of climate change. Now, as a software engineer, you're going to be included in a lot of decision meetings. So use your seat at the table to speak up and make sure that you're pushing initiatives and asking questions that push these climate-aware actions. Here's some examples. You could build features into your product or platform or service that make it really easy for users to donate towards climate initiatives. A good example of this is Stripe Climate, which allows its users to donate some % of every transaction towards climate organizations. You can push your company to switch over to using renewable energy, like they did at Facebook, Microsoft, and Google. And you could utilize your platform or service to raise awareness for climate change and its impact, kind of like they did with the Sims Life EcoStyle Pack, which allows players to choose energy sources and see how the different energy sources pollute their world and have other effects on their gameplay. Number 4 is to be involved in your community. Now, an active community can be a multiplier for many of the other efforts that you might take from this list. You can provide feedback to improve each other's ideas, spread awareness of initiatives you want to support, and vote together to improve the odds of the outcomes you want. Software engineers are already included in a lot of really high opportunity communities by virtue of just being in these positions to make decisions for their products and their companies. One example of this is software engineering forums like Reddit or Hacker News or dev.to. These are frequented by engineers, so ideas surfaced here go directly to other engineers that also go back to their own companies and their own product decisions. Some actions you could take is to post about climate-related things, especially as it relates to technology. Maybe new methods or choices that are more efficient and therefore better for the environment. Another high-impact community is product user groups, maybe for software vendors like cloud hosts, maybe Google Cloud, AWS, Dropbox. All these companies that build paid products are really going to want to pay attention to those that are using them. So you can use this relationship in order to push for more sustainable options. Maybe ask if your cloud hosting provider is running on renewable energies, if they have sustainable practices in their supply chain. If not, see if their competitors do. Changes in one player in the space can quickly propagate to other players in the space. So this is a good community to leverage. Number 5, choose better technologies. Software projects use machines and energy to function. The resources we use in our projects do have a direct impact on the environment. According to the EPA, about 25% of all greenhouse emissions in 2019 were emitted for the purpose of producing energy. So the technologies we use in our projects have a direct impact on the amount of energy they require and thus have a direct impact on the footprint we have on the environment. So keep this in mind when you're planning your next project. Keep your environment footprint as small as possible. Some examples of choices you could make that also impact your footprint. One is programming languages. So C# handles more processing per server than Python or Rails by a factor of about 22x. So this means for the same workload, C# might be able to process this for about 22 times less energy consumption. Another example is technology implementations. Proof-of-stake blockchains like Tezos use up to 1 million times less energy per transaction than proof-of-work blockchains like Ethereum 1.0 or Bitcoin. Hosting is another area like this. As I mentioned earlier, you might be able to choose between hosts and decide whether they're being sustainable or not. But even within hosting providers, you can often choose between a serverless option versus the more traditional, always-on dedicated machine option. The serverless version allows you to just use the compute that you need and not use it when you don't need it. If you can free up compute resources when you don't need them, that means less energy used, less machines for you, and less impact on the environment. Not only are these decisions good for the environment, but they're also often pretty good for your wallet. If you don't have to pay for, the energy or the machines or whatever, then usually your costs are going to be a lot less. That's what I found after my first failed startup and influenced how I actually host all my projects today. And now on to 6, which is to make existing systems more efficient. The truth is that you don't always have the luxury of changing an entire technology stack that you're using. But that doesn't mean you can't still have a substantial impact within the current system and current stack of your service. This is basically the big O of n versus O of n squared discussion. By improving the efficiency of your code, using caches and hot paths, not doing unnecessary work, not over or under fetching, you can make a lot of small improvements that together will add up to really large improvement in the efficiency of your service, as well as its footprint on the environment. Some specific examples from my own career: I improved the scalability of a core infra service by 10x by cleaning up and optimizing a bottleneck code path. This meant we could scale our processing without having to buy more machines or use bigger ones. In another example, over a matter of 2 years, I landed a series of very small efficiency wins that together netted over $1 million per year in savings with respect to the cost of new machines and energy consumption. Each of these changes was relatively small, but together it can really add up. On to number 7, donate to organizations. Sometimes you just don't have the bandwidth to spare to work on these problems. Donating is a great way to get some immediate impact without much effort. Now we have to be realistic that by donating alone, we're probably not going to make that much of an impact unless you have the resources of a Zuck or a Bezos or a Musk. But I'd have to argue that it is better than nothing, and it can be a very good first step to starting to make an impact. As an example, I donate monthly to 350.org. There are many great organizations out there, so do your research and start donating today. So those are my 7 ways to help fight climate change as a software engineer. Now the next step is up to you. Pick an action and take a step. I'll link my original blog post below in the description. It has a bunch of links and citations and additional examples of things I mentioned here today. And also let me know if you have any questions about any of these actions, or maybe you have some other examples or other ideas for actions that you could take. I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Captain Planet said it best: the power is yours. Thanks for watching. HAMY out.